to you today about Munchausen Syndrome. Before you laugh, please know that a number of respected psychiatrists believe this really exists. People who make themselves ill because they want the attention and the bustle and the emergency activity that ensues when they're sick. Munchausen's Syndrome. He was an old baron, 18th century guy who told a lot of tall tales. That's the reason for the name. Munchausen Syndrome by proxy involves people who inflict pain and sickness on their own children to get this attention. It's a disease which strikes almost exclusively women, including Shalia Williams. Shalia Williams has Munchausen Syndrome by proxy. She was videotaped suffocating her child in the hospital. She has had 2 children, one of whom is dead. One was taken from her at the age of 8 months because of this videotape. May we see that, please? Here is Shalia Williams on tape. Now, this is, drop the lights here so the audience can hear. Watch her hand go over the face of the child. Her hand is over the face. The child's arm is flailing. I'm sorry about this quality of this tape. And now she picks the baby up as a nurse enters the room. This videotape evidence, almost all by itself, resulted in a conviction for Ms. Williams of child abuse, for which she served 1.5 years in prison. She is here in the company of her attorney, Willie Coleman. All right, well, we've got a hanging jury out here. And probably we should...
Without a doubt, the doctor here knows more about this case, and I do think it's only fair for him to have an opportunity to respond.
Dr. Fireman, how do we begin here? Yes. Is there such a thing as Munchausen's Syndrome and or by proxy?
There surely is. The problem is that for those... I wouldn't be in disagreement with those members of your audience or those members of the panel who feel that some serious action has to be taken, perhaps even separating those who do have it from their children and embarking on some kind of educational or therapeutic program. The problem is that some of the people who are alleged to have it for spurious and tangential reasons by a prosecutorial system that has advocate and adversaries, that moves a serious medical issue into the criminal justice system, that pits state against individual, and then mobilizes a whole program of intervention others to get into what is basically a medical issue. The medical issue in the case of Melinda O'Brien was simply this. Was there a psychiatrist that the state brought forward to say, Melinda O'Brien has Munchausen's disease by proxy? The answer is no. There was no psychiatrist called. A chart doctor reviewed a series of documents available to her from several hospitals that the children were in. There is not one MD physician who has ever examined Melinda, who has ever examined one of her children, who is on record as saying, this lady has von Munchausen's disease by proxy, even though the state hired an independent psychiatrist. Nevertheless, the inferences were powerful enough. The state's argument was substantial enough. The HRS system in Florida is powerful enough to establish an intervention. Those people in the audience who say, shoot them, lock them up, I have no sympathy, don't realize how perilously close they are to one afternoon of the week on some fortuitous happenstance occurrence.
Having a walk-on doctor come in and say, you got something, you're a little crazy, so we'll lock you up and take your kids away. I see your point. This
Absolutely.
is being abused by the legal prosecutorial system. Melinda O'Brien, you have 3 children.
The death of children, a serious problem.
Right. Alfred Fireman Md defended Melinda in her custody battle, and obviously you won it.
Right.
We have here a real live physician who steps forward, I think, to speak for you, and we'll give you a chance to do that in just a moment. Dr. Fireman, you do get to speak. I do beg your indulgence for just one more second here. We should encourage Mark Feldman to give us his own feeling about... Melinda O'Brien, as you know, has 3 children, 1 through 5 years of age, all of whom have variously over the years been very sick. And now she has been diagnosed with Munchausen. She says no. She did lose custody of her children. This is how seriously the state approached her. She does... she will tell you, as you heard her say, I don't have this disease. Do you believe her?
Well, you know, it's part of the definition of Munchausen by proxy that the perpetrators, the people who do this to their kids, deny it. The denials tend to be vehement. The tears flow. I would never do such a thing. As you heard with Ms. Reed, they can often marshal the support of the family pediatrician, other medical providers to say, no way she could do it. One mom got 5 different physicians all to say, this is the ideal parent, only she was doing it. Now, I can't comment on this specific case. I've never met her before. She may indeed have had a lot of bad luck. But we do know of a lot of other very disturbing cases. A boy who was treated for 5 years for a variety of skin ulcerations on his back. Only much later was it learned that his mom was scrubbing his back with oven cleaner. I mean, I can tell horror stories. I'd have the people changing the audience because they'd be grossed out. But you can't necessarily take that at face value. Now, with that,
let's do this once again. 1 through 5 years. Your oldest child has had 2/3 of the kidney removed. Middle child can't hear, had vaginal bleeding, vaginal blisters, and problem with the stool. Constipation type of hard stool. Right. Your youngest child had asthma and can no longer walk.
No, like I stated before, my daughter can walk, my baby can walk, but on occasions with the cold climate where we live...
And you think it's arthritis?
The doctors are looking towards that. As far as my first daughter, the state was so ridiculously accusing me of this that they actually said the doctor removed my daughter's kidney to make me happy. That's what the state said, and they took away my children. They said that my middle child, they said that the doctor, her pediatrician, said that her stools, her intestines and her stomach does not function like a normal child's, but the state says it's not true. It's me. I'm making it not function properly.
Phil, the state, again, I can't comment on this case, but in general, the state sometimes bends over backwards to keep children with their parents, even when we know they should have been removed.
Wrong, not true.
It's absolutely true. There is case after case of judges dismissing cases of Munchausen by proxy, saying, I don't believe such a thing could occur. The children have been returned home and have gone on to die.
Mr. Donahue, we have a judge in Florida who said that when parents of 2 children, when 2 parents of children were separated with the Persian Gulf War and were out of touch with their 2 children, for that reason, that those children became dependent wards of the state, and it was up to the state to decide what to do with those children. That's the mentality of the prosecutorial system.
That was, I assume, in a divorce custody battle.
No, it wasn't. They were in the Persian Gulf War. They were both members of the armed forces. But what I'm suggesting to you is that here we have a medical psychiatric condition, diagnosed by physicians, treated by physicians. Suddenly, the state intervenes and converts it into an adversary defense posture.
Yeah.
Munchausen by proxy is not considered a psychiatric disorder. It's considered a form of child abuse.
Yeah, Dr. Feldman, how would you fake vaginal blisters and vaginal bleeding?
Well, you know, when you think about what are some of the classics, I can see how the state may have accused Ms. O'Brien and, in fact, may have misunderstood in this case. But when we think of what are some of the medical conditions we see in Munchausen by proxy, we've seen fabricated arthritis, blood in the bowel movements, blood in the urine, cardiac arrest, breathing troubles, vaginal bleeding, fevers, seizures. The list can go on and on.
You have women who pricked their finger and put the droplets of blood on the sheet to prove some kind of illness?
They pricked a mother who had infant twins pricked the lip of one of the twins, touched a garment to it, and produced it as evidence that the child was coughing up blood. Well, they removed the child from the home. Child never coughed up blood.
Mr. Donahue, can I say something? When Dr. Feldman tells you that this is not an illness, I was in touch this morning with the representatives of the Adolescent and Child Psychiatry Advancement Society, right. And it is clearly going to be in DSM-3R as a psychiatric diagnosis. The issue is, if in fact a mother has this condition, what, in fact, is the role of the state? Is it to incarcerate and punish and lock up, or is it to intervene in a productive, therapeutic, rational fashion, even though temporarily temporarily. It may require the separation of the mother and the child. We have not guilty by reason of insanity in homicide, rape, murder, and arson. How about in child care? Maligned, overworked, frightened adolescent teenage
you're
mothers.
arguing both sides of the case here. You think Ms. Reed should be released, but you also think Ms. O'Brien, your own client, was labeled with this syndrome, and it wasn't true.
Right. Some people have it and some people don't. The ones who don't should be exonerated. The ones who do should be treated.
And we'll be back in just a moment. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to know, how old was this child when the cigarette flew through the window and burnt it?
My child was approximately she was 3 months old when it happened. And like I stated before, they called in a burn specialist. The burn specialist said this was not child abuse. HRS, the state of Florida, called in a special burn doctor.
Right.
And they said, no, this is not it. This mother, there's no way. And I'd never met the doctor before.
There's no way a cigarette could fly in a window and burn a child, and no way. It's impossible.
Yes, ma'am, it can.
Mr. Donahue.
All right, before you get the rope and the tree limb,
that didn't fly into the window.
Here's the psychiatrist who was more than involved in returning these children to Ms. O'Brien. Sir.
I don't think it was a cigarette blowing through the window. There was a cigarette in the ashtray of the car. That was the issue. Someone had been smoking in the car, and some of the ash had gotten on the child's buttock.
Sounds like the two ladies.
In other words, you would lean toward intervention then. Unless, of course, it's your sister-in-law against whom the intervention is being extended.
I'm a school teacher, and I see an awful lot of things where
but one of the things Dr. Fireman is trying to say to us is that all of us then become candidates for a fascist kind of Nazi. Hey, honey, there's something wrong with you. We're taking your kids.
Phil,
so at least let's see that. Sir, you wanted to say.
Phil, I think a lot of people also say, let's burn them at the stake, let's send them to prison and do all these bad things to them for life and all those things. But the fact of the matter is that when people go to prison, they receive no help for their condition. Consequently, the person goes in and comes out the same person. If a person is placed in some kind of treatment, then that person perhaps can get some help, and perhaps her condition may be changed.
Ms. Reed nodding with affirmation from Iowa's Correctional Facility. Ma'am.
Mr. Donahue, any of the ladies in this audience can take a child to an emergency room tomorrow morning with a bump on that child's head
and say
they don't know how the child got it. And 15 minutes later, someone will come out and say, we'll see you in court in 5 days. The jeopardy for the average mother with a sick child, now that Munchausen's disease by proxy is getting this momentum and the revved energy that it's getting, and the backlash of furious mothers who are angry with the other mothers, don't know that every time they explode with their own wrath, they are, in a sense,
setting themselves up for future accusations, for future false diagnosis. This comes from Dr. Fireman, who steps forward to say that in spite of these abuses, you do acknowledge the existence of this.
Absolutely.
That's my question. How does a woman today defend herself against such a charge?
That's a good
point. Ask one of the lawyers.
I'd like to address that. I think it's easier to defend a Nazi in Tel Aviv than it is to try and defend somebody charged of child abuse today. It's very difficult. Can I ask the audience a question?
The latest wrinkle in the von Munchausen's disease by proxy situation is when, let's say, in a custody fight, the wife will say that the husband abused the child, von Munchausen's disease by proxy, and then all of a sudden the guy's got to hire 5 lawyers and set himself up for who knows how many dollars because somebody says he has von Munchausen's disease by proxy. It isn't just the mothers.
Which he might.
Which he might.
I would like to ask